Good evening and welcome to African Voices platform. My name is Chiwe Chihana, your host for tonight, in partnership with my colleague Bailo Jallo. We're broadcasting to you from COP26 in Glasgow, where world leaders have converged at COP26 to tackle the climate and ecological crisis, to make new commitments. And whilst we've been here, there have been lots of indigenous populations from around the world that have also come and descended upon Glasgow for the first time ever. We've also been speaking to a lot of young people from Africa who've also come in with their own demands. They're desperate and they're saying, we need action now. They have had enough rhetoric. Please stay with us tonight with all this footage that we've got for you from the COP26. Welcome to African Voices platform. Really pleased to be talking to you. So Evelyn, could you tell people about Evelyn? Who is Evelyn?
Evelyn Acham is a climate justice activist from Uganda who works with Rise Up Movement and Fridays for Future and Global Choices.
Lovely. So what inspired you to become a climate activist? I mean, it's really encouraging to see young people stepping up, but what inspired you?
I started activism in late 2019 after seeing my friend and colleague Vanessa Nakate do her individual strikes on the streets of Kampala. I did not know about climate change, and yet I'd grown up my whole life seeing climate change happening, seeing the disasters happening around my community, but I could not connect it to the climate crisis. So in 2019, when I saw Vanessa do her protests, I got inspired and I started reading, taking some online courses to read about climate change, and I realized it was one of the biggest problems that Uganda was experiencing: the floods, the landslides, the prolonged droughts that are drying up people's crops. I was so disturbed and I decided to start advocating for this. And as days keep going, I feel like I'm more than indebted to fighting for climate justice, because our future is at a risk. Because without climate justice, we're not going to have a good future. We're not going to have a clean future. Our children's future is at a risk, and the future of the next generations to come.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Tell me more about the RISE network. What is it? Who are you as a grouping?
Rise Up Movement was started by Vanessa Nakate. That was last year, after realizing that African voices were usually left out, especially in summits. She's been going to summits and she usually finds that African voices are not represented, and most times she found only herself and a few activists from Africa. So she decided to start up the Rise Up movement to help amplify voices of people from Africa. And right now she has helped amplify so many voices from Africa, and so many of us from Africa are now being listened to by some people around the world, just because of the Rise Up movement.
Thank you very much for that. So why is it important that Africans take ownership and also speak up? Why do we want a seat at the table?
It's very important because Africa is not responsible for the biggest percentage of global CO2 emissions. It's responsible for only 3% of global CO2 emissions, and yet it's suffering some of the worst impacts of the climate crisis. Look at Madagascar. What's happening in Madagascar currently? The famines are so intense. People are dying. People are starving to death. There's no water for children to drink. There's no food for people to eat. And this is why Africa has to speak up, because we are not responsible for this, but we are suffering the worst impacts of the climate crisis. And yet again, we do not have enough resources to adapt to the climate crisis. And the $100 billion that was promised to be given to the communities that are most affected annually has never been delivered. So we are demanding for climate justice. African voices deserve to be on the front pages because we are suffering some of the worst impacts.
Thank you very much for that. So when you actually look at the current leadership and you actually think of activities, conferences such as COP and any other mitigating conferences, are you hopeful?
I cannot say I'm not hopeful. Yeah, we have to keep being hopeful because every day more voices are rising up, more people are rising up to me personally, this is the first COP I'm seeing more voices of people from most affected communities being represented. Yes, I cannot say that there are enough voices coming, but at least it is different from the rest of the COPs. And to us, this is like the last COP we are hoping to see change, because time is running out. We have very limited time. According to science, we only have, by 2030, the impacts of the climate crisis will become irreversible. But again, for some communities, we cannot wait for the 8 years or the 5 years to come. It's already happening to us right now. We need to see action right now. So that's why we need to speak up for the people who cannot speak up for themselves.
Thanks so much, Evelyn. Speaking in the context of the most affected people and areas, and we've got quite a good representation, which includes yourself at this COP, and young people. What is your unified demand as young people who are really driving this from the most affected most affected people and areas? What are your demands at this COP?
We are demanding for the leaders to stop making empty promises, because they have been making empty promises. I've never attended any summit before, but the young people have been attending summits and received only empty promises. We are tired of empty promises. This is the 26th COP, and we haven't yet seen any change. We haven't yet seen any promise being implemented. We are tired. Enough is enough. We need to see action. We demand justice for the communities that are most affected. We demand justice. We demand social justice, environmental justice, racial justice, education justice, gender equality justice. We demand every kind of justice, because climate change is interconnected. It affects every sector. It affects every sector differently. And again, it's affecting Africa differently. So we are demanding justice in this climate summit. We need the leaders to understand that to us, the present is already catastrophic. Absolutely
important demands that you're making there. And I guess to marry that up with everything else, you cannot participate actively in climate change if your democratic processes are not functional. You cannot participate in climate change and in tackling the ecological crisis unless gender equality is attained. What sort of platform in present day then do you see that's actually working towards that intersectionality of things?
The leaders need to start by being more inclusive in decision-making rooms. Like most decision-making rooms have only men, so they need to be more inclusive. They need to include women in decision-making rooms. They need to increase more finance in education, because climate, I've always talked about education. In my country, education is very important, because girls are dropping out of school and they don't have a hope to education. They don't have a future to education. This is because of climate change. So they need to change the education system and include climate education in the school curriculum, and increase finance for education of the girl child, increase finance for education of the children. So like I said, climate change is interconnected. So the leaders need to look at all sectors of life to make sure that we achieve climate justice, because we cannot achieve climate justice without achieving racial justice, without achieving gender equality. That's why more women need to be included in decision-making rooms. More women need to be given voices to speak up, and they need to be listened to, because they have solutions that can change this world. They can make solutions both at household level and international level, and usually women who lead come up with very big solutions.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. And maybe just the very last question I'm going to ask you is, as an African child growing up on the African continent, becoming a young woman, what do you think the role of the African Union can be, or has been, or should be in tackling the climate and ecological crisis?
I think the African Union basically needs to bring African countries together to speak up, like to stand as one and speak up for their rights, because African countries are all experiencing the climate crisis differently. It's affecting different countries, but different countries are experiencing it differently. So they need to come up together and join efforts to speak to the to speak to the world leaders, especially leaders in the global north, to make sure that they demand for justice. And also it needs to play a part in creating more awareness about climate change, because in Africa so many people do not know about climate change, because this is not in the education system, this is not spoken about in the media, this is not spoken about by our leaders. So this needs to be something that is implemented in every government in every African country, so that it becomes a topic that is spoken about every day.
Thank you very much for joining us on African Voices platform. Can you please introduce yourself? Tell us who you are.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Mutaya, climate activist based there in Kenya.
So you are here, of course, for COP26. Tell me what motivated you to be here.
Okay, what motivated me to be here is just to come here to show the world leader that we need our voice to be heard, especially from most affected area. That's why we are here as youth, and also by myself. Just try to show the leader they need to act now, not later, because they have been having this meeting every year, sitting down but coming with empty promises. So this time we came here, we wanted them to act now, not later.
Speaking of you wanting the leaders to act now, not later, as a young person, why is this important to you?
It's very important because for me, I'm not only the future generation, but the now generation. We have been seeing how this leader have been doing, especially for the youth. We are the one we have been going on strike, but most of us are being arrested, and we are telling them the truth. Just follow the what is happening around the world. You need to act now. That's why we are always on the street, like me by myself, because I know if I'm not going to do today, my future generation, they will be in trouble. You have been seeing floods in different areas. Now, currently, Kenya is experiencing one of the worst drought. Estimated 2 million people are going to suffer from drought. Yeah, animals are dying. That's why we are continuing to fight for our future.
Of course, it is not only Kenya that will be suffering from climate change. Many of the global south countries or third world countries are suffering from climate change, and yet most of the emissions come from the global north countries. What would be your message to them?
Okay, my message to them is they need to be very serious, because they have been taking Africa like a dumpster. You see, they have been not taking Africans serious, because I can give you a scenario. Part of this year, if I remember very well, we had a flood in Germany, in London, also here in UK. And we also had the same drought in Madagascar, but there was more attention of them being focusing only in Germany, but left out what was happening in Madagascar. So they usually see Africa like it's a dumpster where you can see even the vaccine inequality. We have a lot of things which is happening, which show that we are no longer being recognized, especially international and also in platform. Yeah.
We've got so many of our leaders here today, of course, from African countries. Do you think their representation here will make a difference?
No, it will not make a difference. If you can go very well and then you check on I can't remember which app, if you can go and check the advertisement there, we have most of these companies which are polluting environment, they have been given a chance to be in this COP. And in this policy making, they're not giving the youth the chance to be there. They just give this company, which they are the one who are going to come up with the decision to favor them, because they know they are polluting the environment. Not other people, not youth, not other people. That's why for this COP26 this year, no, I don't think they will come up with a good solution.
So let's talk about Kenya here. Being from Kenya, what are the policies right now that the current government of Kenya have taken to tackle climate change?
Okay, I've heard that many policies, like they want to introduce climate change in education, they want to introduce blah, 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 but most of those policies, they are just been sitting in files, not implemented. Because if they want to implement them, I think there is going to get them some problem or not getting some profit, because most of our politicians are, for them it's about profit, not humanity.
Do you think many people in Kenya know about climate change?
Not only maybe in towns, but in rural, most of them, they believe climate change is a curse from God and other things.
And what do you think us as Africans or as young people needs to do to change that narrative?
I think we need, first of all, we need to get more education about climate change. I think that's the only thing we can maybe to know more. Yeah, just let our government and also our leader to introduce climate change into our education, and I think it will be good for us. Yeah.
You've traveled in many European countries before you got here in Scotland, where we are here today in Glasgow. How has your trip been received in Sweden and other parts of Europe?
Yeah, in Sweden it was nice meeting. Even Greta was the one who was welcome us in Sweden, and then we did like a climate live there, and also we did a global strike there, and it was very nice to see that as we were doing strike, police were guiding us and also were protecting us, rather than in Kenya, where if you want to do a strike, they can't give you a permit. They just want to chase you away. So it's like it's vice versa. In Europe, you are being protected very well, especially when you are doing strike. But then in our country, Kenya, it's a trouble. So visiting these countries, it's teach me very well what is happening, because here in Glasgow, I've been able to see that most of the vehicle within the city, it's electric, you see, but then in Kenya it's fossil fuel. So this country need also to give the chance, also the money to this country, especially to our city, there in Nairobi, which is usually congestion with traffic, jam and everything. Yes, because talking about this, we want a good generation. We need to move out from fossil fuel to renewable energy, and that is one of the implemented Kenya need to do. Yeah, after visiting this country, I've been able to identify that.
Speaking of those challenges, like for instance, wanting to do a protest where you are not given a permit to do so, do you think that's one of the challenges that is facing us as Africans, where as a result we are suffering quite a lot on climate change because there is no chance, or we are not allowed even to raise the awareness about climate change?
Yeah, that's one of the part of the thing I think is affecting us, especially because if you want to organize a strike, you need to get a permit like 1 month earlier, and you may get it or not, and they may limit amount of people will be going on strike, you see. And also our leader, they will not welcome us in their offices to discuss. It's not like here in UK you can just call a leader and then you can discuss. Then in Kenya, if you can call a leader and confront him about this and this, next day you'll be disappeared, they may kill you. Yeah.
There are so many young people here today like yourself, including Vanessa Nakate and Evelyn and the Swedish activist. What does this mean to you personally? And also, do you have hope that this year's conference will have a positive impact?
Yeah, it can have a positive impact if this leader can just include youth in this policy-making issue, include marginalized people, and include everyone, especially those people like these youth who have been going in street most of the time to demonstrate about climate change, rather than just including these business people, CEO from this fossil fuel company. If they can come up with us, I think it will be one of the successful COP.
Just finally from me, this year we've seen most of you, the young people, have been listened to as well. Just a couple of weeks back, we had what the Swedish activist Greta Thunberg said, the blah, 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 and that has become like a global phenomenon now. And most of you are now listening to where we are here right now. You've had a press conference where all the media, or the world's media, were on you. Do you think there is hope there?
Yeah, there is hope, but you usually find some media, you are just like they are just concerned only on Greta, but not other activists, you see. Knowing that most of this press conference was about people from MAPA most affected area. That's why you need to that's why you are saying media, can you please concentrate only on these people, not Greta. Yeah? You see, because we have been seeing one of the things which has been failing, especially activists, especially in Africa and also around the world, is number one is media. Yeah, because you only concentrate with these famous people, but not these people who have been mostly affected.
I got here on Saturday. I joined the Camino to COP with the Coat of Hopes. Do you know about the Coat of Hopes? You've heard about them. So I joined them on Saturday for the last leg of the Camino into Glasgow, and then we joined the XR march into central Glasgow as well on Saturday.
And why was it important for you to be here?
I just wanted to make my presence felt. I just wanted to come here, and I've got this sign that has Mother Earth, a picture of Mother Earth with help on it, and I just wanted to come here, make my presence felt, to the delegates, which is very difficult to do because we can't get access to them. But for me, it just still felt important to be here, to physically be here, and to show that ordinary people feel strongly enough to take time out of their lives and come along and you know, encourage the delegates to make the right decisions for our future.
So we've had quite a few COPs. What is your hope in them this time around? Do you think we'll achieve much from this one?
If I'm honest, I don't, but I don't want to believe that. There's a part of me that just really wants to be maybe naively optimistic. But I think what we need from this COP is, it's not kind of slight policy changes. It's not, you know, a bit of greenwashing, a bit of, you know, let's make things sound good for, you know, for the public. We need radical change. You know, that's my belief. You know, I think, and it isn't just about getting new technology, although some technology might be helpful to slow down climate change. You know, we need to radically change the way we live, you know, and we're all one planet. We have to stop thinking as individual countries. We need to think of globally, you know, and we need to particularly think about the countries that are suffering the most at the moment, where climate change is a reality now. It's not some, oh, we need to get some renewables in so that we're okay in 10 years' time. You know, there are people, you know, having to leave their homes, who are being devastated by climate change now. So we need radical change, and yeah, I just don't know. I don't know if the leaders, you know, and the delegates and the people in these buildings that we can't get into are up for that. You know, they're trying to win the next election in their, wherever they are, in their next jurisdiction. But sorry, I'm making you laugh. But, you know, that's what they're mainly interested in. And, you know, I think we need to move beyond that kind of politics and say, look, this is one planet. We are all one people. We need to, you know, work together to make this planet habitable for generations to come.
As you're watching them, there's something you spoke to earlier. You were talking about the radical change. Does radical change in any shape or form look like establishing probably a parallel system to the existing system that's tackling the climate and ecological crisis? Maybe people-centered? I don't know.
Well, yes, exactly. And I think you're right. I think we probably need to do some things within the current system to slow things down. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a grandmother, I'm a mother, you know, I'm an ordinary person. I don't know, but I know that, you know, obviously there are things we can do to help slow down the damage and, you know, at least stay still while we create this alternative system. But, you know, I think the alternative, this is my view, and it probably may not be the view of other people and maybe some of the delegates, but that, you know, we need to deconstruct capitalism. We need to completely change the way we see the planet. I believe we're all interconnected. We're all nature. We're all part of this beautiful planet, and these resources are not there for us to extract and just use and make profit with. They're for us to enjoy and to make sure that they're there for future, you know. And I think indigenous wisdom from indigenous cultures should be the leaders, should be the real leaders right now. I feel their wisdom and their knowledge of how we relate to the earth is far superior to how we're relating to it right now. And I think we need humility. I think we need to learn and listen from cultures that have thrived in other systems, not the kind of industrialized capitalist system that we're in now. And I think there's a lot we can learn from them. But what that's going to look like, I don't know. But I feel it's going to be, I think if we're going to survive in a way that we would like to, that will keep a planet that's worth living in for the future, it's going to need to be quite radical. And as you say, people-centered, animal-centered, earth-centered, nature-centered, resource-centered. I'm quite a fan of Donut Economics, Kate Raworth's book, and, you know, just living within our resources. For me, that's what we need to learn to do.
Today I'm here purely because it's the climate change conference. The global village has become incredibly small. The African continent is part of that global village. Climate change does not respect political boundaries. It does not respect geographical boundaries. We have all learned the hard way with respect to COVID-19 that started in the east and went to the west, started in the northern hemisphere and went to the southern hemisphere. So the idea that the African continent or African countries can be islands unto themselves politically is a nonsense. So for me, coming here to climate change, I'm trying to bring that discourse in, and I'm being very upfront with the whole thing to say when it comes to climate change, we on the African continent have behaved badly. I'm looking at post-independence, the entire continent. We've had leaders who have done a disservice to the population, all for the sake of getting that money and doing the whole thing. There's a wonderful ancient saying from the First Nations in America, the Cree Nation. It says, when all the trees have been felled, when all the fish have been caught in all the rivers, when all the rivers have been polluted and have stopped, then mankind will realize they cannot eat money. That was said by Cree Nation chief. That saying is still important today. And yes, of course, I know there will be many Africans, whether in Europe or back home, who will say Chief Ndiweni has really said harsh words to us. But I'm speaking as one of our own. I live by the seasons. My people live by the seasons. I'm a man, an ethnic man of the soil. If the soil is ill, I become ill. If the rains do not fall on time, I become ill, and my subjects come to me to say, Chief, what has gone wrong? So you're hearing it from the horse's mouth. I'm not giving you diktat from some procedure or data protection somewhere else. This is on the front line to say it has not been going well for the African continent. And more importantly, what I'd like to bring over to yourselves is that at this climate change, when the international arena agrees to those new restrictions on international change and they bring forward whether $5 trillion US or $10 trillion US to assist developing nations, those monies must not go to the governments themselves. Those monies must be utilized by those with the know-how of how to address climate change. They must go for those particular areas. And so that is why I'm bringing that particular issue over to ourselves, to say when the money comes, it must not go to a particular government. It must go to those who have been trained, who know how to deal with climate change and all those things that come up.
It's really interesting to hear your perspective, what you've just said. But looking at it in an indigenous relation, talking of the governments not doing enough, the African governments not doing enough to tackle climate change. Hundreds of them are here today, or dozens of them.
Yes.
What will you say is really needed for the African continent or for developing nations looking at it? Because the fact is that the global north countries are the polluters and the global south countries are the victims of climate change. But yet not many of them are represented, or when it comes to the table, they don't get that. They don't get to stand or to sit onto the same table as the global north countries. They don't have the same powers of decision makings.
That one there, it's very easy to answer that one there. The global north, the First Nations, if I can call them that, they polluted. We understand that, we take that on board. It has happened, the deed has been done. But then what now comes over is to say, how do we rectify that pollution there? And this is when those developing countries should come to the table. But when they come to the table, because they're trying to rectify anything, if I give you an example, coal, the use of coal. In the G40, in the G20 in Italy, they said they're now stopping the funding of new coal power stations globally. I don't know when they'll start doing that, but they put a time frame on that. Now, when they do that, and yes, I would be saying as a person from Africa, I too want to develop, I too want that energy, I too want those kind of things there. I will then be able to come to the table and say, for me to stop using coal, you need to assist me to utilize solar energy or wind energy. But my cry here today as a chief, I'm saying, because of the corruption that is in all African countries, when that international money comes through, to assist me and you. It doesn't get there. Before we know it, it's in a Swiss bank account. Before we know it, it's gone into some other different place. We are saying that when those finances come through, they must go to those who are entitled, who know how to deal with climate change, so that at least that can be effective. From my side, my part of the world, I have seen environmental degradation whereby it's been open cast mining, looking for gold, looking for diamonds, and it has been left like that, which then produces soil erosion, river erosion, all those things. So I'm not looking at the bigger picture, which there we say the West did it. I'm coming down even to the small picture to say, look, folks, in my backyard, it's happening in a different way. So I'm not going to let my guys off who are meant to be representing me in government to say just because we're having a difference of opinion with the West, it doesn't mean you can get away scot-free. You too are guilty.
There has been so many COPs. Do you think this conference or the COP26 conference is still fit for purpose?
The COP conference is definitely fit for purpose. Just because an organization or an institution fails at one time or another, you don't throw it away. You have to come together. I made reference a little while back about COVID-19. Folks, we're living in dangerous times. Let me put it to you this way. What if for COVID-19 we could not get a virus? What if for COVID-19 that thing was 100 times more detrimental to us? It takes one incident. And for us, I think the time has come for us, number one, to recognize that this little rock we call Earth is actually very small. Very, very small. And something so small, so invisible, can put it off kilter. And we're in trouble. So I'm saying if COP is not working, let us fix it. If something is not going well with COP, let us fix that.
How can we do that?
We can do that there by putting in stringent rules of accountability, of transparency, of saying that when nations agree to certain things in COP there, they should be effected in law so that there's a penalty to be paid in the international courts, in the international arena, so that even the US government is petrified of not meeting its targets that it brought forward, so that it is more meaning. At the moment, it's rather loose. It's not quite as regimental. We need to make it more regimental so that there are penalties to be had if nations do not meet or uphold what they said they want to do.
You spoke of the challenges that as a result of COVID, that has come as a result of COVID. But do you think most of these or many of these challenges or the failure of COP can all be put as a result of COVID?
No, it's not as a result of COVID. COVID, I was using it as an example to say, here is something that started in some country in the world. Let's be clear. It started in a specific country. Donald Trump said it was China. We don't know. Maybe the jury's out on that. But it started in a political country. It started in a sovereign country. And within 6 months, it was global. Me in Matabeleland in Zimbabwe, I was being affected by this thing. I have never been to China. I have never been to Russia. And yet in my homestead, sitting there quietly amongst my children, as a chief, I note very well, I've been keeping records of how many people have died. The elderly, the infirm, the sick have died from something we did not see coming. So I'm saying that is just an example I'm using when I'm talking about the environment and climate change, that also climate change is in that arena of facts. For me, climate change is the fact that in my area now, the rains are falling out of sequence. There are fewer. We can no longer plant the crops that we wanted to plant, that my ancestors used to plant. So we bring it even closer to home. I'm trying to break down the argument so that it's not developing countries against developed countries. We are all in the same pot.
And just finally from me, let's talk about the political situation in Zimbabwe. How will you describe the current political situation in your country right now?
The current situation in Zimbabwe is dire. It is incredibly, incredibly dire. We have a government in office that is guilty of genocide. It has not been brought to court for that genocide. So straight away that gives you a picture of seriousness. that if you have a government that was guilty of genocide and is still in office, you have a problem. The rule of law is on the floor. Democracy is on the floor. All the pillars that support the rule of law, i.e. separation of powers, independent judiciary, independent law enforcement, independent military, whatever, they are all on the floor. We basically have a dictatorship in Zimbabwe.
Sorry to interrupt you there. If that's the case, why aren't so many Zimbabweans here? You've only got a tiny minority of Zimbabweans here today.
We have a tiny minority of Zimbabweans here today who could make it to come up here today, purely because of the difficulties that the way they live in and the likes there. Being thrown to the four winds of the world and coming over here. I think if you look at the NHS, in the NHS in the United Kingdom, the majority nurses and doctors that come from abroad are Zimbabweans. They are there, they are working their socks off.
That can be debatable.
Yes. They are there, busy working their socks off to support those ones who they left back home, because the government of the day cannot afford to do that. That government back home is not sending them to school, so the people here have to send them to school. So we're looking at that particular issue on the one level. On the other level, we have to be honest in our talk here. On the other level, we're looking at a government that's been in office for 41 years. It has instilled a sense of fear amongst the people. So even for some Zimbabweans to come here, to be viewed in the cameras, on picture, they are a little bit hesitant to say, if my face comes out here, what will happen to my mother back home? What will happen to my folks back home? So it's a two-edged sword, whereby on the other side, we would love to have big crowds, but we're also being human and understanding the fact that there's another dynamic involved in that.
My name is Sarah. I'm an activist from Zimbabwe. I belong to this organization by the name of Zimbabwe Human Rights Organization. I'm here to show my displeasure because our leader, who is President Mnangagwa, who's come to join with other members of state in regards with what is happening back home in Zimbabwe. This man is not supposed to be here, simply because in our country there are lots of human rights abuses. No human rights, are being respected by any means. People are being killed. People are being jailed for just saying that this thing is wrong. Our hospitals, they are dilapidated. There's nothing in Zimbabwe. Teachers are not being paid. Doctors are not being paid. Trees, they are cut left, right, and center. Deforestation. And you see someone coming here with 150 delegation. For what? Yet people, they are lamenting back home. They have nothing, absolutely nothing. It's a shame for the British government to invite such a person to be in this country.
So the shame is in him coming, not necessarily that he's here to make commitments for towards tackling the climate and ecological crisis. Is that inconsequential?
No, I don't think so. I think he's just coming here for his own benefit, really. Just come because remember, our presidential has been banned to come to UK for many years. It's the first time, maybe after 25 or 30 years, to come in this country. For him, obviously, if he was invited, it was like, oh, I have to go. But in comparison with what is happening in my country, surely this man doesn't deserve to be here. Doesn't deserve to be here. And we are happy with the British, Prime Minister, because they know we have been all over the place as human rights activists to show our displeasure. And obviously they know very well what's on the ground and how people are going through, thick and thin in that country, how they are suffering each and every day. So, yeah, I don't agree with him being here.
And what's your expectation from the protest that you're participating in? What would you like the outcome to be in an ideal situation?
I know it's a give and take, the outcome, but it's us just showing the world that we Zimbabweans, we in UK, we are not happy with him, Mnangagwa, to be in this country. Of course, I don't expect to get much, but we are voicing for the voiceless, because in Zimbabwe you're not allowed to protest whatsoever. But here, there's freedom of speech. There's freedom of protest. So we are here on behalf of our fellow men in Zimbabwe, to say to the world what is happening. We are not happy with that. We are not happy with Mnangagwa being in the United Kingdom. So we are standing for the people who are back home in Zimbabwe, who don't have the right.
Okay, so in an ideal world, what would you hope would be happening in Zimbabwe itself in terms of the leadership? You've got an election coming up. What do you hope for?
We are hoping for change, definitely. Change, change, change. But as we speak, there is we haven't got free and fair election for decades. Last 2018, the opposition leader won, but because of the junta government, which is the soldiers, they all obviously use their powers.
So do we have evidence of the opposition winning in the last election? Where's the evidence? Tell me.
The evidence obviously is in the paper, but I don't have it. But definitely, because obviously our leaders got all the V11s, and obviously it's been said. I won with 2.6 million, but obviously, if you know the election was fraud, it was changed 3 times. The results were changed 3 times for them to reach to the last result.
So I think this is a dire. You're from a human rights organization. So right now, I think you've brought into contention the position of the Electoral Commission of Zimbabwe. You've got an election coming up. Do you still trust the Electoral Commission to do a good job? And
absolutely no, because the thing is, surely there are no reforms to start with. We're crying for reforms, but they are refusing, which is one thing for sure. That if they reform, they're going to reform out of power, which they don't want to do. So, of course, people, they want change. And people, I know they're going to vote in numbers for the opposition. But obviously, like I said, they are the people, they are the soldiers, they are the army, they are the judiciary, they are the ZEC. So they will know how to play around with the system, which is a shame.
Yeah. In recent times, your neighbor Zambia just had a big election where the opposition actually did win. The voter turnout was predominantly from the youth. How are the youth mobilizing, especially now in the times of social media, where a lot of mobilization? Do you have hope in them coming out and stepping out? Is that a wave that's going to happen in the region at all?
We have already started what we call the citizen convergence. And obviously people, they're going deep in the rural areas. Because always ZANU, they will claim that in the rural areas, that's where they are strongholds and that's why they are winning. But we have recently started, and obviously the opposition leaders going all over the place. But to tell you what, he's been trailed with the CIOs, with the soldiers. I think there were 2 attempted assassination last week for him, because he's now going into the rural areas where they say he's not popular, but the numbers of people who have been coming out for his rallies to see him and talk to him, it was just something else for the ruling party. So now they are trying by all means to stop him to go in those rural areas, which they say they are the stronghold, that's why they win. Which to us as citizens, it's a lie. Because in the cities, there are many of us than the rural areas.
Well, this was our highlight for this year's COP26. Where we followed activists from around the world who had gathered outside parks and also the Armadillo Center, where over 120 leaders were busy negotiating to the Global Day of Action on Saturday, the 6th of November, which saw over 250 movements around the world joining in protest in over 300 towns and cities across the globe. Until next time, this show was presented by myself, Bailo Jallo, and my colleague Chiwe Chihana for African Voices platform. Thank you for watching and have a very good night.